Are there other loopholes for regular people like Jeff to escape paying taxes? Asking for a friend? Yeah.
Did you listen to the Hot Breakfast this morning? Here's what you missed.
Exposé contained in 12 million files leaked to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and citing leaders around the world with offshore accounts, businesses, real estate, you name it. And they even name names, from our own President Uhuru Kenyatta to Gabon's President Ali Bongo Ondimba, the Russian President, Czech Prime Minister, King of Jordan. I mean, they're all in there. The question is it illegal to have offshore accounts?
And earlier on, I tried to explain to Jeff what an offshore account. Now, Jeff used to work in South Africa at some point, sindio?
Yeah, even in Nigeria.
Then he came to Kenya. Sinapata mshahara hapa, lakini haitoshi kutuma out of the other country, ile account ya South Africa bado iko na R1. That is still an offshore account. Kweli urongo?
Joining us live in the studios right now is Economist Tony Watima to unwind, or no, just tell us, decipher for us, if you will, about this offshore accounts. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you.
So was I correct on offshore account?
Yeah.
You're correct.
So in one of those 11 million papers, Jeff anaweza kuwa ametaja na font 3.
So it's not illegal to have an offshore account?
An offshore account basically is an account outside where you reside. The dynamics change when people talk about offshore accounts is that these offshore accounts are places where there's a lot of secrecy. So you find that quite a number of countries within the island regions didn't have capital or resources. So they decided we will make our place to attract capital for development by making it a secret place where you can keep your money, and also a tax haven. And tax haven means there's a very low tax. So you attract capital for development. And so many people opted for such places. So there is no issue about setting up an offshore account. But the dynamics change when you're a politician. That's one thing many people missed in this conversation. So generally in the anti-money laundering laws, there's something called politically exposed person. You go through a different process when you're transferring money, especially big money. You are required by the central bank, will require you to verify where you're getting your money. But apart from that, the central bank of that country reports differently about a politically exposed person. A politically exposed person is a politician or a relative to a politician, and a very top politician. So chances are you're moving money that is illegal because of your the nature of your position within governments. And so when you're moving money, to say from here to UK, UK will want to know if you're a politically exposed person, the accountability is higher, the threshold goes higher, and you reported under the International Financial Center, under the economic crimes, so that you investigated that the money you're moving, you're not laundering public money from that area. So the whole thing about why people use the tax havens is that politically exposed person use that because they know the threshold of moving money to them is quite high. And so when you move money to a secret place, you avoid all that. So the conversation that about tax havens and why politicians, as you mentioned, the people who are mentioned, is because of that. Generally, they're the people that money laundering laws target. And so they try to use those tax havens because of secrecy, confidentiality, and all that, to avoid that international anti-money laundering laws and standards that is set.
So when leaders like President Kenyatta are mentioned in this, I mean, does it come as a surprise?
Not really, because generally tax havens and such kind of offshore accounts attract people like that, and that's why you have politicians and relatives of politicians are always mentioning that. So it's not surprising. The only surprising issue is always that the amounts of people mention when these transactions are leaked. And for example, the case of Kenya, the money that was mentioned, about 3.3, that President Uhuru Kenyatta's brother had, 3.3 billion Kenya money will not be transacted in places like UK and US. He will have a lot of accountability to make. And so that's why somebody will opt for that route. So generally, the issue is always about the figures that we mentioned that surprises people. But most politicians tend to use those tax havens, especially for funds that are illegally acquired. If you look at the case of Chris Okem and James Gishuru, that's exactly what happened.
The president has already responded to the Pandora Papers. He says it's good for transparency's sake, and he said he will say more when he comes back home.
Yes, I think the president is trying to do collateral damage. First, when you say that we might investigate about it and opens up transparency issue, that is a very difficult thing that the global world is struggling with, because this money doesn't come to Kenya first and then goes to this place. So you find that somebody in government will want to make a deal with somebody from a different country, and so the proceeds of corruption, he will generally give an offshore account where that money is deposited directly. It doesn't come through Kenya. So if you're monitoring that money from Kenyan side, you will not have paper trail to follow that money. So you cannot say that that's an issue that you can handle from Kenya side. It's very impossible because you have no trail of that money, what happened. So an issue about transparency and declaration of all this kind and creating an investigation will be a very difficult thing that many countries are also struggling with. So it only happens that when data leaks like this one happen is when these things come out. And data leaks happen because most of these happen from law firms within those tax havens. And data leaks because all these transactions are always put up by law firms. And so they leak data from law firms, and that's how we get to know about these transactions. If there was no leak, there is no way we would have known those kind of amounts are happening.
And you can imagine the other kind of people with offshore accounts when you talk about very powerful politicians.
Yeah, there's a difference. It's good that you raised that. I needed to make that clarification. For example, the Man City coach Pep Guardiola is mentioned, and that's a different case. It's a different case because for him, if he made that declaration, so he earns money, a lot of money from his tool of trade, and if he makes that declaration within Spain, he's charged a lot of money in terms of taxation. So he decides to declare his income, part of it within those islands, and so it doesn't attract a tax liability within Spain. So for him, his money is genuine and he will register it under his name. For politicians, they don't register it under their name. One of the cases that we have about the first family is that they registered it under a trust, and it's a blind trust. So the blind trust means you open a trust, but it's not you in control. So it's blind because you are avoiding secrecy and management of that trust. So if somebody was to trail that money, it's not your face of it. So you open a trust account to shield yourself from confidentiality, so somebody cannot trace you. And that's how many of people launder money. From that trust account, you're able to buy a property within London linked to that account. And that's one of the cases that happened, that the first family bought a property in London through a trust account. So you're not able to know from London who exactly bought this land or this property, but it's linked to a trust account.
Let me ask you, sometimes people mention these amounts, and $30 million seems like a lot of money, but for a family that's been deep in business and from the days of their father being a president, it's likely that they have these kinds of money and the connections they've had and the businesses they own.
Let me put simply how the context of 3 billion Kenya money that you mentioned, $30 million. With that amount, it's a capital that you can open a tier 3 bank. It's not small money. It's huge money that if you are to go to CBK and ask for a license, you qualify within capital requirements. You can get a license to open a tier 3 bank. So it looks in figures when you mention, but it's big money. 3 billion is an amount that we say KRA can collect within almost maybe a day. So it's not small money. But the question is, when you mention that 3 billion, 3 billion was only leaked in one account. So they generally had 13 accounts. And so one account has 3 billion, and that's 3 billion lying. We can talk about 3 billion as investments, but not as cash that you have within bank accounts. For example, in Kenya, it's only 1% of people have accounts of more than 1 million shillings.
Niko kwa hiyo 1%.
So you can imagine someone having 3 billion. That's a huge amount to have it within your bank account, because you have commitments, you have investments, you have all that. You will end up spending your money. You cannot have it lying within your account. So that's big liquidity money.
Let me ask you, so sometimes people highlight that the people have evaded tax, like Tony Blair. Is it called Tony Blair?
Yes.
Evaded paying £300,000 worth of tax. Are there other loopholes for regular people like Jeff to escape paying taxes? Asking for a friend.
But what he did, talking about Tony Blair, what he did was not illegal, apparently.
No, it's not illegal. He tried to it's called tax avoidance. Tax avoidance generally is legal. You're trying to reduce your tax liability within the frameworks of the law. Tax evasion is what now is illegal, and there's always a small difference within that. The ways that you can manage it depends on the nature of business you do, that you can try to reduce your tax liability within the law. So, for example, one of the things has been that the issue about minimum tax. So what people do when the tax before minimum tax was that there's corporation tax that comes when you get a profit. That is 30%. And so what people used to do is that instead of paying that tax liability of 30%, I invest in a new machine if I'm in manufacturing. And so in accounting, it comes as a capital you've put in your business. And so capital is not taxed. And so you reduce your profit, but you've invested in capital. So when it comes to paying corporation tax, you've reduced your tax liability. So there are many ways that people do that, and that's one of the main things that they say minimum tax was brought because of those kind of things.
Is that why, like, some companies will say we are declaring a loss of X amount for like 20 years?
Yes. Sometimes it's called creative accounting, that you try to manage that in terms of your liability on corporation tax.
Yes.
And so you try to move your expenses higher and liability so that you don't end up with a lot of profit and you pay the taxman a lot of taxes. But apart from that, there is another difference, and that is one of the issues that has been in the tax appeal, and it comes especially with the offshore accounts. So you find that in Kenya there are quite a number of companies. Let me use two examples of companies. One company is a communication company and set up in Kenya. So they made a lot of revenues from businesses in Kenya, but in terms of registration, they registered the holding company in Mauritius. And that holding company is said to have to be the owners of the equipments in Kenya. At the same time, the directors have a different company and say the company is registered in Mauritius. So what happened when it comes to paying taxes? They said when they make their profits in the year, they repatriate a big portion, saying we list those equipments from a company in Mauritius. And so they move a lot of billions there. But basically what they're doing, they're just moving their money outside the country so that it's not taxed heavily in Kenya. So it's called transfer pricing. And so they went to court, and the tax appeal found that money made in Kenya needs to be taxed before it's moved. Another company, a betting company, had the same problem also. They say the system for betting companies that they're using in Kenya, they have leased to a company registered in a tax haven. And so they are paying billions of money for using that license. But essentially, when you look at all those two cases, the company registered in Mauritius and in Kenya have the same directors. So it's one and the same people trying to move money.
Yes.
So that is technically tax evasion in Kenyan law.
So to that law, you're saying that they said now money made in Kenya has to be taxed.
It has to be taxed in Kenya.
And what's the tax like?
It depends on the kind of nature of transaction. If it's just profit, you pay 30% corporation tax. In terms of moving money like dividends, so the companies like Safaricom will pay dividends to Vodafone in UK, you will pay a 5% tax on dividends.
So they still manage to escape that tax, but it's just that now they pay that.
Yes, yeah. So you can decide it's a dividend, so you move from 30% to 5% and all that. So it's quite a complex issue.
And that betting company is no longer operating, I suppose.
Do they have some assets frozen worth $2 billion in the UK by any chance?
I know I just engaging with this question. I don't want to mention names.
All right, Tony, question. Between 2016 and 2019, $1 trillion shillings was repatriated back into the country.
Yes.
$1 trillion shillings.
Yes.
So obviously, was it because of amnesty? People were told, look, if you do this in this time, you will not be taxed.
Yes. So that amnesty was basically to regularize people who moved their money out of Kenya. And not really people who moved money out of Kenya, but we also gave an avenue of people who acquired money illicitly, like corruption proceeds that never came to Kenya, to bring their money into Kenya.
With amnesty,
granted amnesty that we will not look at where you got your amount and all that. So long as you have money outside Kenya and you want to regularize it in Kenya, you can bring the money back in Kenya. So it's just bringing more capital back to Kenya. And so we created a loophole that we brought money without less accountability. And what we were looking at is about bringing back capital and probably finding ways that we can tax that money when it's still here. The sad bit is that when that amnesty happened and all that, KRA told us, I think there is money that disappeared, and they could never trace quite a number of it.
From the money that came back?
That came back disappeared, so there was little trace about how it went. And that's a problem of the design of that amnesty. I think there should have been a lot of accountability. Even if you're regularizing, I think declarations has to be made that this is the money you brought, this is what you had, what are you investing in, what is your source of your money. Because for example, we take the issue of Chris Okemo. If he was not didn't have a court case about his proceeds within the British Islands, Virgin Islands, in this amnesty it gave them an option that you can bring that money in Kenya when that money is proceeds of corruption. And so in this amnesty deal, we provided an avenue for people to bring money that is illicitly acquired with less questions and accountability. And I think that's the biggest problem that we'll have going forward in terms of money that was illicitly acquired was brought into Kenya, and we are trying to sanitize corruption in a way by providing that amnesty.
Because some of these systems seems like the perpetrators of this have designed the systems to suit them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How does $1 trillion shillings disappear, or most of it? How does that happen?
I'm going to black out your Facebook.
I don't think it disappeared in thin air.
But they couldn't trace it.
They couldn't trace much of it. I think quite a number of people put it into assets, put it to different projects, and so you don't find it in somebody's account lying. And I can say without fear of contradiction that KRA has very good systems to say that money disappeared without a trace. KRA has a very powerful system that monitors a lot of things that Kenyans do.
Yeah. So Tony, is there pressure now on the president to wire home the billions? Will this story have any legs, or will Kenyans do what they usually do? Talk, tweet, and
then something else comes up next week, and then it's a wrap.
Actually, that was where I was going to, yeah. Even if he was to say that, these data leaks will never end. So even if it's to bring back the 3 billion that is said to be there, the next data lake and your name comes in, then you will be bringing more money. Basically, that secrecy on offshore accounts is something that will never go away anytime soon. And politicians, especially politically exposed people, will always use that avenue. So even if we say today that we will try and bring that money back and force other people who have, though it's very hard to force, you will not have, you'll not target the thing that you're looking for. As we progress more, I think the world is cognizant about this fact, and laws are being placed within global space in terms of trying to deter such kind of things. So you find that the time of Sani Abacha Babangida anti-money laundering laws was not as tight as it is today. There will always be loopholes that these people will take advantage of, but it's not as easy as it was before. So the more we move, the more we progress. I think we find ourselves there is more accountability. Even the data leaks itself is accountability. That the more these things happen, the more data leaks will be coming up, and the more we can hold the people that get exposed. We hold them accountable going forward. In fact, one of the problems that we have globally, and it's a conversation globally, is about do we implement a global minimum tax, which means that what tax havens have done, they've called it a race to the bottom. So every country is trying to put a tax to remove taxes so that you attract capital. So it's a race to the bottom that no one is gaining, but you're just moving down as reducing taxes so to attract capital. And the question is, there are countries that are losing a lot of money in terms of moving this money to tax havens, so which is US is one of the biggest hit. And so the conversation is, do we introduce a minimum tax for all countries? You cannot charge a tax lower than that, because you find in Kenya you'll pay 30% corporation tax. You go to those islands, you're paying 0%. You cannot compete with those countries in attracting capital. And so the conversation is globally, do we set a minimum global tax that every country complies with? So we say 10%, no one goes down 10% tax. So that there is a level playing field in terms of attracting capital. And so those kind of things will always be happening as we progress as a society. And we hope that accountability, especially in terms of anti-money laundering laws, corruption, illicit flows, will be tamed as we progress more.
Do you feel like that is actually realistic? Because knowing the tax havens and all the money that's been pumped in there, all these influential people will fight that tooth and nail.
The good thing that it's being led by the US and the US government currently, the Biden government, she's called Janet Yellen, who is the Treasury CS, is one of the people pushing for that. The problem will be all countries in the world agreeing to that standards. That will be the biggest problem.
Yes. How does a country become a tax haven? Just, I'm wondering, because, you hear Mauritius,
yes,
for instance, or even Cayman Islands.
So for them, they don't have resources. They don't have much of what can we call revenues or is big business that you can say you have capital to develop. So they design the islands that you can bring money here. For us, we'll do it for development. You just bring your money, but there's no accountability. So there is secrecy. You can bring your money. No one will know it's you through shell companies. For us, we're just interested in money to invest in our economy. And so you just say that today, as Kenya, we're putting a corporation tax of 1%. And anyone who wants to come here is not liable to a lot of confidentiality on how you get that money. That's how tax haven come up. And then, so many people, the fact that you're creating a secret and confidentiality place, quite a number of people who do businesses that don't want to be trusted will always come to your place.
Let me ask you, if you like there's a kid listening, and obviously this is big money, if you're a tax expert, what do they need to study? To be what? My daughter is 9, but I can see her future clearly.
I think to answer your question, I think where the big money is not in the tax side. It's in the law firms. It's law firms who put together these transactions. And you find that people who register these companies, the address will read the law firm. It will not read their own addresses or addresses of any. It always reads an address of a law firm. So it's always law firms who make the money. So if you talk about big money, you'll be having maybe a return of 1% of that money. If you're talking about big money, so a law firm will be retaining that kind of money.
So I go to school and do tax law.
Tax law. Yes. Tax law.
We're going to start with this and the Jeff LLB. Offshore. Offshore is our business.
Tony, what's to stop a country from becoming an offshore haven? What's stopping it?
So for example, Switzerland developed as an offshore tax haven
to this day.
Yeah. But they changed quite a number of things, especially on accountability, because a lot of proceeds of corruption used to end up in Switzerland. And so within the international banking system, I think Switzerland attracted a lot of backlash. And so they decided to put some checks and balances that if proceeds of corruption are identified within Switzerland, then it will be confiscated. The fact that other havens don't do that, whether it's proof of proceeds of corruption, is one of the biggest problems we have. So like the British Virgin Islands didn't have that specific issue, but the fact that they're part of the UK, later they had to succumb to that if proceeds of corruption are identified within your jurisdiction, then you're obliged to take your law into confiscate such kind of property and prosecute such kind of process. So generally, countries will tend to change their modus operandi, and we hope that quite a number of them will follow the Switzerland way. Today, Switzerland is used by big business people who can account for their money. Will use there, but today the Babangidas, the Sanya Bachas and all that rarely use Switzerland because the law will catch up with you.
So when Switzerland confiscates the money, do they return it to the country of origin, to the government, or they keep it for themselves?
They return it to the country of origin, but they set up a framework on how that happens. It's not that they just repatriate. They try to look at is that money put in development of that country. So it's not just repatriated, but who exactly is being held accountable, who is the owner of the account. Apart from that, that money goes into development of that country, because basically it was money denied for development of that country.
So you're saying that amnesty obviously didn't work, but it did pump $1 trillion shillings back in the economy, right?
Yes.
Did that end? Did that window end?
Yes. That window end. I think it was a period of, I think, 9 months.
Should they reopen that window, Tony? Because the economy right now, especially in the times of COVID, is suffering.
Yes, it's a very difficult question there. If you're opening, you can put that amnesty, yes, but you need to put accountability a little bit, because you don't need to open it for proceeds of crime. I think that is where we need to draw the line with that amnesty. If somebody is just a businessman who thought a tax haven will reduce his tax liability, and you're telling him bring that money without being taxed, I think he will have a genuine reason to bring back that. And those are the kind of people we need to attract with this amnesty. But making it a blanket amnesty that anyone who has money outside there is able to legitimize their money back. I think that is a problem, that we are trying to legitimize corruption in a sense, and saying because we don't mind how you got your money, just bring your money. Then it means everyone should steal and later wait for an amnesty deal, then bring your money back. True. So accountability is one of the biggest problems that we'll have to look at when you're designing amnesty deals like that.
Yeah. Since the Pandora's box has been opened, are we likely to see more names, Tony? Are we...
Yes. It's a big cachet that went out of the data leaks, and I'm not sure they've exhausted all the information that was there. But what I'm sure is that these data leaks will happen for a period of time, and the data leaks happen because there are countries that feel that the tax havens are doing a detriment to the economy. For example, in US, you find that Facebook earns a lot of money, and they have a lot of cash reserves. But staying it within US, you're taxed a lot of money. So Facebook is one of the companies that use a tax havens. They move their money to tax havens as a cash reserve and put their money there. So for US is complaining that that's big money that is moving. And you find that these data leaks are basically about accountability in some way by fighting the legitimacy of these tax havens.
I don't know if people remember this during Kibaki's time. Remember there's talk of billions being siphoned out of the country, and then they created this Kroll report. Remember they commissioned the Kroll report?
Yes.
And what happened to that? I mean, we forget very easily, Tony.
The Kroll report is interesting because it had a lot of details about movement of money and had names, especially law firms. Law firm that moved money. In fact, the Kroll report was the best way because there was a paper trail of money moving from Kenya to outside places like Luxembourg. The problem is that we had an ineffective government that will have followed up. There was a lot of evidence of paper trail. So these days it's very hard to find paper trail because money doesn't come into Kenya. And what happened within the Kroll report is that there was a lot of disclosures, but many people, the government of the day did not follow up to its thing. So you find that like the tax amnesty we gave today, somebody who was mentioned in the Kroll report had an opportunity to bring that money back. And you've already legitimized his corruption dealings. And so as we move forward, we need to find a way to deal with economic crimes. And one of the things I proposed some time back, 3 years ago, when in a petition in Parliament, is that first we need to have an audit of declaration of wealth every year. Make that register public, so that me and you can say we're looking for Jeff earns this money as a public officer, and this year you got this money, so probably you've bought an apartment here. Is it declared in this year? So the accountability of holding state offices changes because it's an involvement of public offices. But apart from that, is that anyone in government cannot do business with government.
That proposal of yours will never see the light of day.
Actually, it was killed in the floor of the house. Because actually it was about that if you're doing business and you're a state officer, you will need to put your business in a trust. You cannot be running business because there's always been a conflict of that, so you'll have to put it in a trust. And as you say, the proposal was killed. But that's how countries hold state officers accountable in terms of separating state functions and private interest.
But even across the world, there are people who still do business with the government through proxies. It's just
shell companies.
Yes. It's just that here people just do it in your face. But in the UK and everywhere, how do these people become rich and their salaries are out here? Everyone knows what the Prime Minister of the UK has.
And exactly, you might do within a proxy, through a proxy, but your details about your income and everything is there. So the moment you buy a property, for example, and it doesn't tally with your income, in the UK or in the US, that property will be confiscated because you'll have to explain how you afforded that property.
Okay, Tony, moving forward, it's an election year. This story, will it have any legs? Is it going to go on for a while, or is it...
So definitely in an election year, what happens is that people are cautious about the next government, who is coming in, who will come after us, and all that. And capital flight always happens. So there are people who will be moving money. So as we're trying to hold people accountable, these data leaks and the first family being told money to come in, I think the reality is the opposite, that many people are uncertain about which government comes in, and there might be a target, especially people who are not sure that they don't do genuine businesses. So every election year, capital flight is expected, that there people will want to try to hide their money. And so I don't see that these will have legs in terms of the nuts and bolts of holding people accountable, especially people who have offshore accounts. I think what will happen is simply the Kenyan politics that we play, and this will be a political issue that rivals use against each other. But in terms of accountability, I think there will be less of that.
I think what Tony's trying to say is the more things change, the more they stay the same. Tony Watima, as always, great talking to you. Asante sana.
Thank you so much.
This is no doubt what we call
Candid interviews with decision makers.